Welcome. This is For Better and Worth,
the podcast where we don't believe you have to sacrifice your relationship while you build your net worth.
We are your hosts.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Ericka Young, and we're so glad you joined us today.
All right, y'all, come on. Let's get into it. Warning, the following statements may be contrary to our usual programming.
And we're back.
Yep. So back at it again. I had to throw that little warning out there because what we're going to talk about today, it may not go in tandem with our traditional thoughts and views, but we know everybody has felt it. So.
Yes, and it's honest. I mean, if we can't be honest on here, what are we? We might as well stop talking and forget it all, right? So we are here to tell a truth. How about that?
Look, we know we felt it, and we're sure that everybody out here has felt it before. Because if you've been on any sort of journey to get out of debt, to, build your savings and, work towards retirement, at some point you have just felt like, you know what, man, forget this. I'm just throwing caution to the wind.
I'm just done.
I'm just going to do it.
Right. I just want to do everything. I just want to buy everything. I just want to quit saving. I'm sick of it. I'm tired. And that I have felt on many occasions over the years, right? I feel like I have said, I just want to throw caution to the wind. And what that means to me is I don't feel like looking at the budget. I don't feel like tracking the money. I don't feel like staying inside of boundaries that we have set up, or I don't want to look at whatever the boundary is, right? And so that is what throwing caution to the wind has meant to me, is that I put aside my nerdy tendencies so that I can dance freely in the wind.
I think it's funny because, we were talking about this, and I try to think back just to times when I was like, man, forget it. I'm just going to do it. And I think I have felt that way less or fewer times than you have felt that way. Because like I was saying, we were talking, it's like, yeah, you've said this on several occasions. Like, you know what, forget it. I don't want to do it no more.
Yeah.
I just want to just do whatever I want to do.
And there have been times where I've asked you to do the budget or to track the spending for a season because I was mentally
just burned out.
Yeah, because I do it for clients all the time where I'm always looking at numbers and spreadsheets, and I just needed a break. And so for mental health and sanity, I needed to switch roles. And even here recently, I have been like, you know what? I'm just in this moment where I feel like I'm tired. And that in and of itself hasn't happened much in our 25-year, marriage. But it has happened, maybe a few or just one handful of times where I've said, I need to step away. Can you do this?
But you know what? I think it's one thing to kind of get tired of the logistical things of managing the budget. But we're talking about really how when people are saying no, or they're sacrificing, or they're delaying gratification to try and accomplish a goal, sometimes people start to feel like, man, when am I ever going to get there?
Yeah.
When am I ever going to feel like I can do the things that I want to do? I think it's those moments that people started to say, man, I'm throwing caution to the wind. I'm just going to do it this time. And I deal with the fallout later. And I think it's funny because you will say, I'm throwing caution to the wind. I'm going shopping. And I'd be like, okay, because I already know that your caution to the wind is still like $100.
And that
$200.
is, you're right, honey.
So I'd be like, it's pretty safe.
Right. So yeah, when I loosen the belt straps, it's really not detrimental to any major long-term plans. You're right. And I think that something about that is interesting because I feel like I've put a lot of pressure on myself to actually stay within boundaries because of the work that I do. And I feel like there's times when I just want to just be free like everybody else is free. You know what I mean? And not necessarily using credit cards or not necessarily going out and getting a bigger house. Like it may not be like huge differences, but you're right.
It's that underlying rebel that we all have deep down. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do right now. I just want to act out, or I just want to, do whatever it is you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's the wrong thing to do, but you're like, man, doing wrong feels good.
Yeah.
But look, that's how sin is.
So we are not sinners over here trying to do anything that is unholy. Okay, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, but I'm making light of it, making fun of it, because when I throw caution to the wind, our spending levels are not.
Dude,
they are not equivalent.
You add zeros, okay? Like literally. I don't even want to hear those words come out your mouth, because then I should get scared, real scared, if you throw caution to the wind.
Like, wait, hold on, my man.
I'm like, hold on, big fella.
What are you talking about, But, my approach, like I said, I haven't felt that way very often, but my approach has always been, I'll step back, because in marriage and relationships, people, you need that yin and yang. Because when somebody is feeling one way, both of you can't be feeling that same way. You need somebody to counteract or be on the other side of that. And when you feel like throwing caution to the wind, I'm always on the other side like, well, let me think about it. Is this going to change the course of life? And I've said that a lot over the years. And I will think about like, well, it's not going to impact us short term or long term. It's not going to keep us from doing anything that, we're planning on doing. Well, just go ahead and do it. And so I just think of it in those terms, because I'm like, well, if it's not going to change the course of life, then go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And I appreciate that perspective, because I feel tension or stress or this responsibility to uphold a standard. And it can be easy for people to fall into that, gotta do it right, gotta do it perfect. And, how is this going to affect if we decide this month we're not going to pay off extra on our debt, or this month we're not going to do blah, blah, blah. And, we're not perfect people. We're not perfect people. And I think you have balanced me, because I'm definitely the person who overdoes it where it concerns like the budget needs to balance. I need to know the numbers. I need to understand. I get real off into that ditch, if you will, because I'm just that numbers person. And I have learned to pull back a little bit and say, okay, in the grand scheme of things, like you say, is this going to change anything? And usually it doesn't.
Yeah, and I appreciate you wanting the budget to balance and, to be all of this stuff, but I'm always like, well, okay, let's take a look at this. And I don't look at it with a fine-tooth comb, but that's what makes relationships work, is when you have somebody who is so far off in the ditch, you got somebody with a tow truck who helps pull them back onto the road. Like, okay, let's keep this thing on the road. Let's not get it off into the ditch on either side. That's what makes relationships work.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I have to be that way. And that's just how I'm built also, where I don't have to get so deep into, every penny lining up or adding up. It's like, yeah, we are there. And I do get into the details and I am specific, but, I feel like in moments I don't need to be that way because you're that way. Mm-hmm. I need to be exactly what I am in that moment to, kind of balance things out. But here's what I really want to know. Here's what the people want to know.
Uh-oh. Oh, Lord.
Is when you throw caution to the wind, I said, in my mind, it's only, a couple $100. So I'm like, it's safe. But what would you say is you throwing caution to the wind?
I mean, I create a plan. So one, I create a plan and then I don't look at it. And then I just don't even care if I'm inside the plan, right? So that's throwing caution to the wind.
Tease that example out for me. Like, what does that look like?
You have a clothing budget of $400, and you want to spend, you don't look at it or you don't pay attention, or it was a couple weeks ago when you made the budget and you're like, forget it. I don't care what it is. I'm shopping and I'm doing it now. And that's just it. And then you're like, hold on. Oh, Lord, I done spent $389 and we still got 2 weeks left in the month, right? Like that kind of stuff is anxiety ridden for me. So in order to let it go, I just say I want to throw caution to the wind. And that is my way of almost telling you, babe, either you got to reel me in, you got to get me out that ditch, or, you got to have this conversation where, you know what, it's not a big deal. Like one of those things need to occur, right? And so it's making sure too that at some point I reevaluate. So sometimes in the past it was you get paid on Friday and you're like going out to eat, you go shopping, you go do something fun, and you done spent all of the entertainment money, all of the dining out money come Monday, and you're like, wait a minute, we still got 10 days left in this pay period. What have I done? That was throwing caution to the wind because I didn't pay attention to the budget. And I think a lot of people do this. They're like, they may not say they're throwing caution to the wind, but it happens all the time where they're like, oh, we just got paid, so let's go do. And they don't realize that you need to make sure that you're still within the boundaries so that you reach your goals. It's not to just stay in the boundaries just because, it's so that you reach your goals. And I think I'll be very honest and say, because we've reached some specific goals, I find that I feel like I want to say, I want to throw caution to the wind more often because I don't think that I have redefined for myself what is okay. I think my mind is still at, you need these boundaries, whereas there may be bigger boundaries. So for instance, throwing caution to the wind 15 years ago, for me, might have been $100. Now, I'm pretty sure I can easily spend $100, but like several $100s, right? And I'm not to the point where I'm going to just randomly spend 1,000. That I'm not doing, right?
I think that's part because you just don't enjoy spending money
You're right.
like that.
You're right.
But I think that's a good way of thinking about it is like you throwing caution to the wind is kind of just really loosening your boundary or, extending, maybe beyond the budget.
And not thinking about it. Just
Right.
not having to really be accountable to
Right.
it.
And I get that because I think a lot of people get to that spot where, you've been not dining out or you've not been shopping or you've not been doing, fun, entertaining things, and people just get tired of it. And then they reach a point where they do go and spend the whole month of entertainment or your whole 2-week budget on entertainment, food, and dining out, all that. You just went one weekend, you just did it all. But that's a lesson also, because for those next two weeks, you like, oh man, this is no fun for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard part is, do people actually say no fun for the next 2 weeks?
Maybe not.
Right.
And you don't know until, people tell you or your clients have shared with you. But I know for me, and I think you make a very interesting point, and this is what people, as you go from level to level, as you get out of debt, as you get that, emergency fund built, as you're working towards your retirement, at different levels, you have to adjust. Mm-hmm. Because I know for me, throwing caution to the wind, like you said, today, it's very different than it was, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Because now I throw caution to the wind. Like if we're doing a project or, we were doing a remodel or we were doing, improvements or whatever it is, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it because I want to do it right the first time, and that's really when I started to say throw caution to the wind, because I'm like, look, nope, we're going to do it. Everything is toe up. Just fix it right. Do it right the first time.
Yeah.
If you're remodeling, I'm like, look, I don't want to come back and say, well, I should have did this. And I have times where I've looked and we've done different projects and I was like, man, I wish I had done ABC. And I just want to live my life with no regrets. And so it's a little different now because I have more freedom, more flexibility to be able to say yes to things because I don't have debt, we've got savings, but it still makes me think about it. And so I plan differently. So I don't have to throw caution to the wind. So I think as I've gone from level to level, my process has changed. Whereas we may have thrown caution to the wind before, now I'm more intentional about how I plan. And I'll build in some margin. And so is that margin already there so I don't have to throw caution to the wind? And if I don't use that margin, then I'm like, okay, cool. And so I think it's just a strategy thing in how I do and how I move now.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good life lesson, just in budgeting in general, is never put zero on things that you deem to be important, right? It is unrealistic for literally anyone to put zero down for dining out. You're going to dine out, even if it's Chick-fil-A or if it is one date night out. Or
family of 4 Chick-fil-A, it's not cheap.
No, or pizza night. That's dining out, people. Like, it is different than buying a pizza from the grocery store. So, it is unrealistic to put zero down. And you might want to create margin, like you said, so that you are up underneath that and don't feel like you have to bust the budget. That's the other thing is, think about if you didn't have certain items in the budget, would you bust the budget to get it? And for me, that's definitely my hair. Like, my hair is getting done. Okay. We got to cover this gray. Okay. but I think that you have to think about it like that. It, is, don't be so serious about your goals and the future that you spend so much time making this perfect budget that is completely unrealistic, and you're going to bust the budget to go off and do something anyway. Let's figure out what that is. And then, frankly, if you can't do it every month, that's okay. Do it every quarter or whatever in order to get those things done, but don't deprive yourself. And I think that's the other distinction too, is that I don't think that we've ever deprived ourselves. I don't feel like even in our get out of debt moments, we did not deprive ourselves. There was never a time where we said we're not going out to eat at all. There was never a time we said we're not going to go get clothes and go shopping. There's never a time we said we weren't going to go.
Well, I think there are people who would say, well, you guys should have if you were serious about
some people might
doing what you said you wanted to do. And I think that's why we've adopted the progress over perfection kind of mentality, because you got to do what works for you. You got to do what works and what's best for your life and the life that you're choosing to lead. Because at the end of the day, you got to be accountable for what you choose to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think, what we try to, as you guys are listening, what we try to do is give you the practical side of it. And that's why I had to leave with my warning, because some of this is fundamentally contradictory to some of the things we may tell you to do. But, maybe not fundamentally, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
we don't want you just throwing caution to the wind. What we want you to do is I want you to stop, think about it, and say, okay, is this going to change the course of life? Should I do this? And then maybe just adjust your mentality down the road.
Yeah, and I think that if we don't let you know that we have had moments where we're like, forget it all, I just want to throw all the papers in the air, that's not being real. Like, this is just honest. Like, I am a nerd who didn't want to be a nerd for a hot second. How about that? And so I think it's important that we don't put on straitjackets and restrict ourselves to the point where we can't move. And that is not sustainable. It took us 5 years to get out of debt. And if for 5 years we did not go dine out, I mean, honestly, I feel like that would have affected our relationship. It would have affected the way that we're able to communicate with our kids. I have found that, when we went to a restaurant and nobody had to clean up or nobody had to cook, like no dishes were involved.
You would have stopped liking to cook a long time ago.
Yeah. I mean, for real, that part right there. So, like, I think that we have to be realistic. So we would never have just, not dined out the whole time. That's not real. Our kids needed clothes. We wanted to look nice. We wanted to have vacations. We just did it with cash and or differently, you know? And so I think on coupons and, all of that kind of stuff, we employed as much as we could in order to, feel like we could have both. We could enjoy our journey. And I think that you make a really valid point that we need to expand our definition of what is going to keep us inside of a healthy boundary today versus what it was 5 or 10 years ago, you know?
Yeah, and I really believe that, I think we've talked about this in previous episodes about rewarding yourself. And, sometimes I think you've got to be intentional. And one thing that helps is building into the budget, just not only margin, but like, we put in our budget just play money,
Yeah.
and sometimes that is just what's required to satisfy you in the moment because it doesn't have a name. It's not tied to any particular thing. It's like, just do whatever you want to with this. This just blow money. If you want to just go eat this money up and dine out, cool. If you want to go, for me, buy some new sneakers, boom, go do that. If you want to go and shop and do whatever it is you want to do, or if it's an experience, whatever, I think that helps you along the way to keep you from throwing caution to the wind. Because whenever you deprive someone of something long enough, it becomes a frustration. And it's that frustration that begins to kick in that you say, you know what, forget this. I'm going to do what I want to do. I go to work, I work hard, and I'm just saying no. I don't feel like I'm making progress. I can't have fun. I can't dine out. All I'm doing is paying off debt or, trying to save. And it starts to feel like a rat race.
Cuz it is. Cuz it
And that's
is.
why you have to reward yourself along the way. You have to create margin in the budget. You got to do those things because that is being smart to help get you where you want to be in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not an easy road, but we have felt those moments of just being like, you know what, man, I want this over.
Yeah. You said that. That I think the way that we express feeling like we're in a box is different. But I've heard you say, I just want this over. I just want to be done. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I get it. I think we will be remiss if we didn't actually talk about what it takes to get back on track. And I honestly can't go very long without knowing the numbers. So even if I have had a weekend or even, pray tell, a whole week of not really looking at the budget or tracking the spending, getting back on track is simply getting aware, like being aware of what just happened. So looking at how much you spent on clothing for the last 7 days, or looking at how much you spent on dining out, or whatever the vice is in your house, like actually facing it so that you know how to regroup. Because if you don't face it, then you have no idea what just went on. You don't even know if you were off track, right? And so the first thing is just to be aware, and then you will find a way to regroup. You said it earlier. It's really just making sure that you look at what needs to happen in the next 2 weeks or the next 30 days or whatever it is to make sure that you're still able to reach your goal. And I think the other thing is, I think practically speaking, being very clear on what your goal is, right? So have I jeopardized in this moment of freedom and relaxation on the budget? Have I jeopardized what it is I'm trying to do? And so you have to ask yourself, has it gotten in the way? And then how do I get back on track? So do you need to pull back on spending, or do you need to do something different in order to get where you need to be, right? And so I think that that's an important question too. And sometimes it's really just that it got pushed out a month. Like, and that's okay too, as long as it's nothing that is time sensitive. But I think that we've got to be honest with ourselves about those questions, right? And so that's an important part of getting back on track.
Yeah, and when you talk about getting back on track, part of it might be, kind of facing the news. Like if you have overspent, you gotta you gotta face your fears and come and recognize that, okay, well, I went over budget by a couple hundred, $200-$300, whatever it may be, and you may have to dip into savings.
Mm-hmm.
And dipping into savings to true it up, though that may not be what you want to do, you gotta face the music.
How does
And
that feel? Like, I think that that's the thing too. Is like, how does that feel?
yeah, and realizing and how it feels and making account for what you chose to do, that's like, okay, well, do I want to do this again? Do I want to be in this same position or situation again? And then I think that's how we begin to change behavior. Because, every week we sit and we talk about, these different episodes. At the end of the day, we're trying to get people to create habits that are going to lead them down the road of not continuing to go into debt and get out of debt, having functional plans in place that step by step you can eliminate debt and build, a secure and a sound future. And though you may take steps backwards in trying to go forwards, it's okay because you can still make progress. But sometimes you got to face the music and just do some of the things that will help to get you back there, like dipping back in to your savings to true it up. And then it may keep you from doing it again in the future.
Yeah, I got a question for you though. So we have different ways of looking at throwing caution to the wind. So you definitely have a bigger picture. Is this going to change the course of life? And I have you know, dang, I wish I had stayed on target because I really wanted to be on target, right? And in the moment right now. Though neither one of those perspectives is wrong necessarily. It's a different way to look at it. I'm curious, what would you say to someone who they're completely not on the same page with this? Like, one person is like throwing caution to the wind and the other one is not receptive even to looking at the big picture. They're just like, you need to be on target. Because I feel like that is pretty darn common where couples have those disagreements like that, and it's hard to resolve.
Well, I think first of all, you got to have a mutual understanding of where are we going. Because you got to have a plan that you're on the same page with. And so if you're not on the same page with a fundamental plan, I think you got a bigger issue. And so if you're on the same page and you guys have both given your input, giving your feedback on this is where we're going, then you decide, okay, how are we going to get there? Because it's not just about the journey, it's about how we take this journey. And you can ride in a car that is smooth sailing, or you can ride in a car where the road is all bumps and speed bumps along the way. And those two journeys feel very different. Because one journey, you're going to get there quickly with minimal obstacles. The other one is going to take you longer because you're going slower to avoid all the speed bumps, all the bumps in the road. And so you got to get on the same page. And getting on the same page is knowing that this is where we're going and this is how we're going to do it. And it's almost like rules of engagement. When we get off track, how are we going to re-engage to get back on track? So it's not he said, she said, or he did, she did. Because all that's going to do is create a conflict sort of relationship between the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's one pointing the finger at the other, it's not going to be a smooth journey.
Yeah.
And so I think those are some of the things that, first of all, you have to do. Get on that same page. Know how you're going to take that journey. And then have rules of engagement that when you get off track, how are you going to get back on track?
I think that's really smart to preemptively have the conversation on what are we going to do in this instance? What if this happens? Let's talk that through now because, and sure, you won't know exactly how, it's going to all play out, but I think it's preemptively, that's a really good idea is to say, well, what if this happened? How are we going to handle it prior to? And then what I hear you saying is, you really do need to be clear on the goal that you're trying to reach. Like, keep the goal in front of you. I think it's really cool to be able to have your goals posted or, honestly, we told our kids some of our goals. And I just think that just being real vocal and honest and, alive with them is important. So let's not forget the goal. Let's always make sure that the goal is visible. The target can be seen. You create cast vision around it and that kind of stuff. And so getting back to the goal will help you not point fingers. Let's look to the goal and not at your partner or your spouse as, the enemy. We're like, let's figure out how to get to this goal. So sure, we might have got off track a little bit. That happens. And the other thing, this is the word that I feel is important to use, is have grace. Have grace because, again, we are not perfect. We are looking for progress in our journey. Nobody is going to do the journey perfectly. And so if we can have grace with one another and we can just say, you know what, there are times when this works and there are times when this doesn't work. And this is, my spouse did something that wasn't helpful to our progress. And okay, great, that happened. Now, how do we prevent this from happening again? And, or, we need to just talk through where did that come from, right? And so I think that having some grace and having some patience and some understanding those are some of the key ingredients, in my opinion, to moving forward from a place of, having to feel like you want to throw caution to the wind.
Yeah, so we talked about, getting back on track and having a plan, but let's talk about that make it worth it moment. What's one additional thing that you would say people need to do to make it worth it?
Well, one, I think that everybody's going to have a moment like this. So don't think you are immune to having a moment where you want to throw caution to the wind. Prepare ahead of time. Just, think about what it is that is going to cause you to want to throw caution to the wind in the first place. What is so important to you? What is your highest priority? And to the best of your ability, estimate that ahead of time. Now, that does require some planning, but I think that you make it worth it when you anticipate those times a little bit better than acting like they'll never exist, because they will.
So for me, when I talk about make it worth it, I remind myself it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so I pace myself and say, if I try and run too fast, I might tucker out. So if I am looking at the goal and I'm just trying to do it in the shortest amount of time and do it the fastest, maybe I might burn out along the way and not get there. But when I realize it's a marathon, not, putting it so far out where it's not a goal that is a short-term goal. Maybe I have short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals, but I just remember that it's going to be an ongoing process, because as soon as you finish getting out of debt, then you're going to be on to trying to build that emergency fund. Then you're going to be on to saving for retirement. If you have kids, you're going to have to, save for education and things like that. But remember, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So progress over perfection, which at the For Better and Worth podcast, you'll hear over and over. So
I heard you say something about running a marathon. Like, that's, we running marathons, honey?
in the spiritual.
I'm like,
not in the look, now, I work out. I get my run on. I get my little short runs on, my HIIT training and my 5Ks, but, I'm not running look. Lord told me, if you got to run and just stop, Chris, square up.
Yeah, because I was like, marathon, what? Listen, I have run a lot in my day. And I am not running no marathons. You pull that analogy out. I'm like, really, dude? A marathon versus a sprint. Now, I get it. Yes, we are pacing ourselves. I think that's a good principle.
All right, so for everyone out there, back to regularly scheduled programming.
You don't want to talk about that, huh?
So we thank you guys for tuning in again. And until next time,
we're out.
Thank you for spending some of your time with us today.
We appreciate all your support. So be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to this podcast.
You can find us on Instagram at For Better and Worth.
And sign up for our email on forbetterandworth.com.
Till next time, we're out of here.